Welcome to another episode of Cybersecurity One-on-One with Larry and Joe.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Well,
Hey, Duane.
how you doing?
Heard a lot of great things about you.
But first, if you wouldn't mind, just share a little bit about with our audience, how you got into cybersecurity, Duane, what your story was. We'd love to learn a lot more about you because you just celebrated 24 years in cybersecurity, and that's really why we wanted to have you on the show. It's such an amazing milestone. A lot of people on Twitter, noted that milestone, and that's how I, became introduced to you and everything. So yeah, let us know how you got into cybersecurity.
I'm from North Carolina originally. That's where I was born and raised. And I went to Pfeiffer University and I graduated with a degree in sociology. And I went overseas to teach English in Thailand for a few months and came back and I stayed with my best friend. And he was the system admin at our college. We went to college together. He graduated a year before I did. And when I was staying with him, one of the servers got hacked. I think it was a DNS server. And I didn't know what that even meant, really. I was just learning, what was it, Red Hat 4.2, I think it was at the time. And one of the other guys who worked there told me about it and explained to me what happened. I'm like, wait, how does someone from a foreign country hack into our computer? That I don't understand that, but it fascinated me though. And I was in a phase of not knowing what I was going to do with my life, with a degree in sociology. I didn't know if I wanted to go to social work. I didn't know if I wanted to do something else because I grew up in a group home. And so the social work aspect is kind of still with me in many ways, especially wanting to support people support young folks who are in, rough home situations that want to, find their, know there's more to life beyond this current situation. And then SANS had just started, the training company. And then they had like 4 or 5 modules that were free from their GSEC training. And I went through those, and this is the benefit of being in an education environment, is my friends, they gave me some computers to play around with and, type the commands, do things, learn to look at log analysis was the first thing I learned. And it's still the most valuable skill I would say I have and appreciate the most of anything. And I cringe when I look at security programs that don't have log analysis as part of the curriculum. And so they let me move to looking at the actual servers and keeping an eye on those and see what was going on. And I still recall Christmas of 97 and New Year's of 98, being in the computer lab, looking at the log to see what's going on, contacting the admins and say, hey, we just saw a scan from your organization, to our servers. Here's some things that you can do. And for the most part, we got pretty good responses from folks. I made a few mistakes, sent it to the wrong person, but those folks were pretty cool about things though. And then I went to grad school at Pfeiffer University in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was a janitor at my graduate school. And that's how I paid for school. I worked in the daytime there, took classes at night.
Wow.
And after I graduated, just for a couple of months, I was the assistant registrar, but I also did computer work, helped maintain the computers on campus while I was working there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a job at Cape Fear Community College in Wilmington, North Carolina, as a Unix technical specialist. And that was my first real, I would say full-time experience, a job in cybersecurity at that point.
What's really interesting about that, Larry loves Linux. So he went to a cybersecurity boot camp and he got exposed to Linux. And he's like, Joe, I love Linux. I know I'm supposed to like Windows because that's what corporate America is running on, but I really like this Linux stuff. And so it's kind of funny that your first position was actually in Unix, which is the father of Linux, right? So
right.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So one of the things we wanted to talk to you about, I saw that, one of the things that you wrote was something to kind of automate your students connecting to the kind of WireGuard server, because you were spending a lot of time, kind of helping students get connected. You're like, hey, I just want to write a script to automate that. And it really kind of raised the question of, hey, what is WireGuard? What is a VPN, and why is that necessary for internet privacy? So someone like, Larry, he was not like, no one teaches you things like about internet privacy in college, right? It's just not a topic they typically get into. And a lot of people, I think, just take for granted, I just launched my browser and it's got SSL, so my ISP couldn't possibly be spying on me. But a lot of people don't realize that your DNS queries, they are seen by your internet service provider, and your ISP, thanks to a law passed a few years ago, is now able to sell your DNS traffic to advertisers. So basically, your ISP is bundling up all your traffic, they're selling it now. And so we certainly have some new innovations like DNS over HTTPS that's now built into browsers, but it's not on by default. But we also have things like the Tor browser, and we have things like NordVPN clients. But WireGuard is kind of next level stuff, because instead of trusting like NordVPN or commercial VPN providers, which, they may claim they're not keeping logs, but maybe they do, or maybe under a subpoena, maybe they have to, and all that kind of stuff. Tell us a little about WireGuard, and tell us a little bit about, well, I have a lot of follow-up questions, but first tell our audience, what is WireGuard? And if you could just give Larry a little bit of background on why you chose WireGuard and why you like it.
Yeah, WireGuard is a newer VPN that was designed for simplicity. A lot of VPNs do a lot of stuff. It's a router, it's a proxy, it's a single sign-on. It has all kinds of bells and whistles and APIs to plug into authentication systems and things of that nature. And WireGuard was designed to do one thing, and that's just to route traffic securely, and that's all it does. And it's only, I forgot how many thousands of lines of code is, but it's really scaled down. And one of the reasons why Linus Torvalds decided to integrate it into the Linux kernel is because of its simplicity and its design. And one of the other features I liked about it is that it only uses a few algorithms. There's not a configuration you need to do on what algorithms to choose. It chooses the ones for you that withstood the test of time. And Justin Troutman, a cryptographer, but they have this concept of green cryptography, and that is taking the complexity out of so many algorithms and things like Wi-Fi networks. You get a home Wi-Fi network, you get a choice of WPA, WPA2, WPA2 Enterprise. Most people don't even know what that means. Just create home routers with WPA2, period.
Right.
It's on by default. And so I chose WireGuard for those reasons. It was simple, but also incredibly fast as far as the communication. And it's very silent in the background, whether Windows, whether Linux, you have it running and you don't even know it's running. There's no performance issues either.
Got it.
And the model I developed or let me rephrase that. The model I used, borrowed from, was that of Zero Tier. And if you're not familiar with Zero Tier, created by Adam Erminko, absolutely brilliant guy. Let me just tell you, that is one brilliant guy. And Zero Tier is really manifested in his brilliance. I like how with Zero Tier, you downloaded the client, and Zero Tier is, it's like a VPN. It's encrypted communication between hosts, but it's point-to-point communication. There's no central server unless it can't route directly to the host you're trying to connect to. You download the client, you install it, you join the network, you're on the network. That's it. There's no other configurations to be done. You get the IP address and you just start routing traffic. And with Nowire, I kind of wanted the same type of feature where folks can download the client, run it, and it's just going.
Got it.
Not a bunch of configuration, not a bunch of bells and whistles and things of that nature. And so because we have a lot of students who work who log in remotely from on that campus at Champlain College, I decided to try to mimic that model, if you will. So I started with Linux. You download a Linux client. And one thing I want to talk about and mention, all my development for Nowire was on a Chromebook, by the
Oh,
way.
wow. Okay. Nice.
Using the Linux beta that it has, all my development was there.
Okay.
And so I wanted to have a client. You download it. You have a menu of options. Run this connect, and you just connect.
Okay. Got it.
You authenticate. So the way it works right now is it uses SSH for authentication. So if you have a account on that Linux system, you log in, you put your credentials in via SSH, it downloads the configuration for you, does a test to be sure you're connected, and you start routing traffic like that.
That's cool. So
I
that's
did the same thing with Windows. I want the same
okay.
thing with Windows with PowerShell.
Okay.
Run it. Here's a menu. Start it. Install it. Whatever, and it's done.
That's really cool. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link to that to your GitHub page on the podcast made page, so that people listening to this, they can go check that out, because
Cool.
that's really cool.
Yeah, it had a couple of pages that were a GUI base for the web, because I included two-factor authentication in case folks want to use that.
Nice.
And it was a plain HTML page, and then Alexandria, follow on Twitter, she came along with her development skills and created a nice interface for it. So I'm going to work on integrating that this weekend.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
One of the questions I had for you was in terms of internet privacy today, people are oftentimes choosing WireGuard because if you go with a commercial VPN client, you're not really necessarily guaranteed privacy. You know, they might market it, they might say it is, but with WireGuard, you truly, like, your egress point is truly on a machine that you control, right? And so you really are able to obscure your home IP. You know, anything you browse is going to come from that other machine wherever WireGuard's installed. The question is, at what point though can you really control your privacy? Because if someone subpoenas that machine, right, wherever that is, they could get your traffic to the point you may never even know. If it's like some kind of a FISA court, kind of thing, they can basically do a port mirror on that device, and they would be gathering all your traffic, and you would never know. So can you really have? I guess the question is, can you really have privacy today, and really trust in privacy? Is that a realistic thing that's possible today?
I don't know. That's a hard question, for the simple reason that you mentioned in your earlier comments that your ISPs can collect your DNS entries. Well, with enough metadata, you can put a picture together on what the person is up to. You don't even have to see their traffic. And the same thing with commercial VPN providers. They tout end-to-end encryption. Okay, yeah, we believe that the mathematics are there. You can't break the traffic. But do you have net flows in your organization? And if you have net flows, there are IP addresses attached to it. And they can tell, oh, Duane had this IP address, and this is his traffic going out to all these places via our provider, even though there's no logs on the VPN server, but there are the net flows. Yeah. So the reason why that's a hard question is because I'm using a VPN, my ISP knows I'm using a VPN. And well, what's so secretive here? And also, like you mentioned, if it's FISA, more than likely no, because they can trace traffic to, Champlain to my home network. Yeah. And then they contact my ISP. What's going on between these times? Okay, let me find out. Are Duane's family members home at that time? No. Okay, this is probably Duane doing this then.
Right.
So no, I would say I don't know, but I don't think it's very difficult to have privacy.
I was reading online that some of the hackers are basically using two forms of tunneling. They'll basically use WireGuard, and then they'll use Tor on top of WireGuard, so that if you actually did, take over that machine or port mirror that machine, at best, you're going to see traffic going to some other Tor node. And all that really does is just lengthen the time, I think, of the investigation, right? Because then at that point, let's say law enforcement takes over that machine and they see it's just Tor traffic going, tunneling through WireGuard now. Now they have to go to that other country and try to find those exit nodes at that point. So it probably delays the investigation, but it's still, I was reading this report on the FBI that basically, they basically found a way to kind of crack Tor. And it was actually using the technique that you described. It had to do with the exact time and millisecond of the connection of your machine, and they were able to correlate it with the Tor exit nodes, and it could have, like, mathematically, the probability, because of the TCP sequence numbers and the timing and everything, the fact that they occurred roughly around the same time, they were able to basically say that is that machine, even though it's, leaving that other machine. So the FBI looked at it and they're like, this is a really interesting problem. We're going to take our best minds. We're going to figure out a way to sort of like show that is that machine. So I think the people listening should just know this, that if you're thinking about getting into hacking, on the black hat side of it, just know that if you hack the wrong company, like a Colonial Pipeline or someone, yeah, the national intelligence apparatus, they'll be able to find you. There's there's probably not a secret why DarkSide all of a sudden started issuing mea culpas and started kind of like saying, okay, we're done, we're not going to hack you. That was like immediately after they attacked a major oil interest of the U.S. Right. So,
well, that's a really good example you mentioned, because even with encrypted traffic, you can, if you have enough of it and you know what site they're going to, what the behaviors of that site are, you can look at the traffic and see the timing of events, how much data was sent back and forth, and kind of figure out, kind of guess what happened during that point in time. So yes, my ISP can say, oh yeah, during this time period there were X number of bytes being sent. Yes, encrypted, but national intelligence has very brilliant cryptographers who can do the math and say, okay, with crypto, it's added this much to it. This exit node had this much unencrypted, so it's probably yes.
Yeah.
So
something you mentioned as well? I'm sorry, Larry.
No, I was just wondering, because what I'm learning in boot camp, you can modify the timestamps, right? So it's saying that if you can modify your timestamps, that when you were on and which site and what site, does that just make the forensics a little bit harder for like an investigator to find?
It makes it harder from the host side, but I'm not sure about the network side though.
Oh, okay.
Because you have to modify the timestamps through every host that you're hopping through.
Really?
For that to be, truly hiding. But something you mentioned that, and that unless something's changed with Tor that I don't realize, Tor doesn't hide your DNS traffic, and so that's probably why they're using WireGuard, because WireGuard will tunnel your DNS traffic to the remote end, so that way your ISP can't see that traffic.
Yeah, great point. So another thing I wanted to discuss was the log analysis aspect. So this is close to your heart, log analysis. Larry's very interested in getting his first kind of entry-level position in cybersecurity, right, as a SOC analyst. What resources would you recommend for an entry-level, position? I know there's a lot of courses out there on like Udemy and different kind of things, and log analysis is critical for a SOC analyst, right? I mean, it's really really important.
Yeah.
What do you tell your students, or what do you recommend, or I don't know if you have any available courses online that Larry would be able to go and check out for learning about log analysis and becoming an expert there.
Well, it's a great question, because on Wednesday I gave a workshop at GrimmCon on the topic was the cognitive science approach to teaching cybersecurity, and I used log analysis as an example of that. So it's like a 2-hour presentation, and it kind of walks through how we should be teaching cybersecurity education based on how people learn. And then about 30 minutes after I get through those basics, I get into log analysis, how to interpret a syslog, and then about 20 minutes on using those same principles to teach web log analysis, and then how to correlate events as well. Here's your syslog messages with this person doing this. This is what you should do. You got the event. Let's see what happened before, what led up to this major log being generated, and then let's see what happened after that. You get an IP address. Okay, let's look at other logs now. as much as I hate to say it, but I don't know of a whole lot of courses on log analysis.
You know, if you,
It's
Duane,
really one.
if you create one on Udemy,
Yep.
we'll put a link on this site for sure to publish that. You can start to get paid by students all over the world if you create a Udemy course or something like that.
That's not a bad idea.
Is the GrimmCon talk that you did, is that a link that we can post, or is that a paid conference? Okay, cool.
Afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, I'd like to post that in the show notes as well.
Okay.
Okay, now one of the questions that we get asked a lot from students, especially military veterans who have a GI Bill, should they spend that GI Bill on getting like a bachelor's or master's in cyber, or should they take that money and go through boot camps and get certs like CISSP and various kind of like cybersecurity certs, really to get that first job in cyber? What do you think is the best use of money?
Well, first, the CISSP requires 5 years of experience before you can sit for that exam. And if they're new, then I would suggest a couple of routes. One is start with Security Plus, because for one, in the government sector, Security Plus is like the gold standard for an intro level. I would supplement Security Plus with TryHackMe.
Okay.
TryHackMe platform is really one I highly recommend, because you get hands-on experience. They have different paths you can take. There's a complete beginner's path. And after 6 months or a year, something like that, if you consistently log in, you consistently engage, you get vouchers for like Security Plus, a voucher for OSCP. So you won't have to pay for the exam. And the best part about it is that it really prepares you, because you get hands-on learning via your web browser. So you don't have to download anything. You can just go to you can have a Chromebook. Go to the web, and each room you walk through, you're actually typing in commands and doing those things. And you get exposed to the different roles in cybersecurity. So you can say, oh, I really like this pen testing. After I'm done with this, I'm going to take the pen testing path.
Okay.
And it exposes you to Windows administration, Linux administration, networking, and then how all that comes together in cybersecurity. So I am a huge fan of TryHackMe. Yeah.
I have a question, Duane, on you mentioned OSCP. Larry's dream is to be an ethical hacker. He would love to be a pen tester, ethical hacker. That's like eventually what he wants to get into. And I was kind of telling him there's kind of a path to get there. Typically, you start off SOC analyst, you kind of build up, and then you kind of like move into that. It's very difficult to kind of hop directly into pen testing. Would you agree with that there's kind of a career path to kind of get to there, or do you think it's actually possible for someone to kind of go right into pen testing?
I believe someone can go right into pen testing if they have those basics: Windows administration, Linux administration, and networking.
Okay.
I think you have to know those, because that's what you're targeting.
That's what you're testing. Got it.
You need to know how those things work under the hood, how those services work. So again, the reason why I like real TryHackMe is because it exposes you to those key things you need to know to be a security professional.
Got it.
And when you go through the security TryHackMe complete beginner's path, there's another certification, the eJPT, the eLearning's Junior Pen Testing certification. And I think that training is like it's free. The training is free, and you just pay for the certification. And if you fail the first time, the second time is free.
Okay. Now, you mentioned OSCP. Is that kind of the gold standard of ethical hacking, or is there any other preliminary certs that for ethical hacking that Larry might want to look into as well?
eJPT is, you're starting to see that with some job requirements, or not requirements, but good to have is the eJPT.
Okay.
And then OSCP, one of the reasons why it is kind of a gold standard, there's been some discussion because they don't like when they've trademarked offensive security, first of all. And they don't like when people try to get that trademark. So if you look past that, they are the gold standard, because one, you learn a lot about pen testing. The certification is 24 hours to hack your way through to the target, and you have to write a report. And what I see a lot of people failing is writing the report.
Got it. Report writing.
Yes.
Now, so people know, this is.
But that's one important aspect about that.
Sure.
The reason why I would say take a different route is because I don't like their method of teaching. They give you a PDF document, they give you a support channel, and they don't really provide much guidance except try harder, or you're almost there, or if they really see you've exhausted all of your possible resources, then they'll give you some guidance. So if you don't learn really well on your own, it's probably not the one you want to jump right into. You want to have some experience, like the eJPT would be a good stepping off point for that.
Okay.
That model of learning is just incredibly difficult and time consuming for people.
So, and just to give people some context, correct me if I'm wrong, OSCP, Offensive Security, these are the people behind Kali Linux, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
So
correct.
that's one of the first things Larry and I did when we built a lab at his house. Is I put Kali Linux on a station,
Nice.
and then I gave him a Windows station to hack.
Yep.
And so Larry, the OSCP certification is actually associated with Kali Linux.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And actually, on their website, they have a mini course, if you will, on how to use OSCP with the it's that vulnerable distribution. I just lost the name of it, but it's up to like version 3 now, where you just learn how to use like Metasploit and various tools and things of that nature. Yeah.
Awesome. So Duane, there's this really tough problem in cybersecurity today, which is this whole supply chain issue, right? Kaseya, our machines are all running software that we trust. You have a ThinkPad driver from Synaptics that gets auto updated by Lenovo. You've got various software that's calling home to get updated. As soon as those companies get hacked, right, it's inevitable. It's going to happen at some point when they get hacked, not if. The attacker can basically, plant code. It's going to run on your machine, and you may not actually know for months. People didn't know that SolarWinds was compromised for months and months and months. What can we really do about this problem of these vendors that we trust that are running these auto update things on our endpoints?
Yeah. I want to just say I don't subscribe to the when but if, because it just sounds so fatalistic. Like there's nothing you can do. There's a lot that can be done to really mitigate a lot of attacks from happening. Because I mean, that statement does have some merit, because someone on the inside could definitely be malicious. So, but
Sure.
I try to stay away from that.
Okay.
So folks know that the work that they can put into it, there are ways to mitigate a lot of things.
Understood.
The supply chain attack is hard, and the SolarWinds is like the worst case scenario when you have a vendor whose software is in so many organizations throughout the world, and a group was able to update their code, inject their malicious code, and gain access to all of these organizations. And there are some best practices that could have been put in place to help mitigate that issue, but that kind of showed how hard that problem is, but also shows that what we need to do is not 100% trust all of our updates, which is why when we apply updates, we need to monitor our systems to see if there's anything strange going on. But it requires training to do those kind of things and know what to look for. If your SolarWinds, for example, is talking to the internet on a routine basis, to me that's suspicious. And for one thing, my network monitoring server, I'm going to block it from actually trying to get out to the internet, and I'm going to log it. If there's any queries coming from my machines to the being logged, I'm going to investigate that pretty quickly.
So let me challenge you on this a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's fatigue that sits in. You update every month, right? Or Chrome updater, Google could get hacked. I mean, who knows, right? So Chrome gets updated, Firefox. So there's fatigue that sits in, because you might have 30, 40 different kind of programs that are updating, periodically. Yep. And you have a day job, you've got family, you've got friends, you've got hobbies and stuff like that. So is it really practical to be doing log analysis on behavioral changes, on all these updates that are happening? I mean, isn't there like a realistic fatigue that kind of sets in on looking at behavioral anomalies? Because in order to know that it's a behavioral anomaly, you have to know what the baseline is, right? And how do you really baseline normal traffic, especially this gets back to log analysis. When you see something happen in a log, the only way for you to know if it's bad is what is the pattern, what is normal. You have to then go back in the log and go, okay, here's normal, and now I see a behavioral anomaly. So how do you really do that at scale when you have dozens of applications auto updating all the time? I don't know if you have the answer to this, but it seems like a very difficult problem to solve.
Right. No, I don't have the answers to it. And one thing you stated is critical: log fatigue. You can't look at everything, and so that comes from training and knowing what to look for and what should we be filtering. But what you're filtering could also be something that's actually going on that's malicious as well.
Yeah.
It's a hard problem, and I don't have a really good answer for it. It's one that when you have controls that are defense in depth, you're also depending on the community. And if you have a good network of people who are posting anomalies and detecting these things, then you have a better chance of managing, or what I would say, you have a better chance of capturing those things before things get way out of hand.
Yeah.
But when things occur and in the government side, in the intelligence side, they may sit on it for a long time before you ever hear about it in the public.
Yeah, because the beaconing traffic, right, is so disguised. It's very difficult to detect, especially let's talk about Cobalt Strike. Cobalt Strike has beacons that will communicate with content delivery networks, CDNs, such as Amazon.com, such as Google. And so when you're looking at pure network traffic, and all you do from a NetFlow perspective is you see a source IP and you see Amazon.com or Google.com, there's no way to really know, is that a normal traffic or is that a Cobalt Strike beacon? Right? Because the beacons are able to hide. So at this point, network analysis in and of itself, void of a correlation with host forensics, cannot actually determine that a machine has not been compromised. You actually have to, in my opinion, we need a solution that could actually correlate host forensics with network forensics in order to identify that Cobalt Strike beacon kind of traffic. It's an incredibly difficult problem. I think this is probably associated with why we're seeing such a rise in compromised networks today, because people are not using authenticated web proxies. For example, outbound network traffic is not getting authenticated. Basically, it's too much of a burden for users to have to authenticate every time an executable needs to reach the internet. That could be part of the solution, right? Is preventing these just random executables from just being able to talk to the internet. Authenticating web proxies have typically been difficult for corporate networks to deploy because of how disruptive and impactful they are. But anyway, interesting thing.
No, but
go ahead.
If you go back to what we were just talking about with those fundamental security controls, if you start with those from the very beginning, if you start with those from scratch, you minimize the chances of that piece of malware even being able to execute in your organization. So for example, web browsers, email clients, if you look at a lot of these nation state and a lot of these attacks, they're coming in through those phishing, spear phishing type things, and also malicious attachments. Yes, you can have antivirus and things of that nature and anti-malware solutions, but those can be bypassed if it's like something new that there's no signatures for. But something you can do on a local system is, one, enable application control. So nothing can execute unless it's on this allowed list. And here's a really good example of how developers need to, incorporate secure coding. Oh, I just lost it. One of the most recent, the Kaseya, if I said that right, compromise. It was documented and publicly known what directories not to allow application control.
Oh, yes.
Which means as an attacker, okay, I'm going to execute this and copy it into that directory if it exists.
That's right.
But what about sandboxing? Let's just sandbox web browsers and email clients. So that there's a limited and restricted environment it can even execute in.
I'm glad you brought that up. Web browser sandboxing is available. Specifically, it's actually built into the Windows operating system. It's called Application Guard, so that the Microsoft Edge web browser can run in a virtualized container, and the user is not really affected. Their experience is not affected. So if you go to a malicious website, where you click on a phishing link that goes to a malicious website. It's all containerized in the web experience, but it's not on by default, and it does require the CPU and everything to be enabled. The bit, the BIOS has to be enabled for virtualization. So there's definitely some dependencies. Obviously, that's not going to work on Chromebooks and things. It's Windows specific. It's not going to work for Mac or Linux. So on a Windows machine, we do have Application Guard. There's other solutions. Go ahead.
That's also assuming that organizations are all going to use Microsoft Edge for one thing.
There is an extension for Chrome. Like if you use Google Chrome, there is an Application Guard extension, so you can run virtualized. But basically, just to build on your point there, virtualized web browsing is one way to kind of try to help the problem.
Or application control, because again, that's built into Windows, and it can be centralized as well, centralized management of that as well.
So let's drill into that a little bit. If I'm running application control, it's basically saying I trust signed executables. So the executables have to be signed, digitally signed.
It can just be by name, path, or directory.
Right, name, path, or directory. And so if I follow Kaseya's, instruction guides, I have to allow anything in this kind of directory. And then, so that's kind of the weakness or vulnerability. If people are following manufacturer sort of instructions and they're told, okay, in order for us to support you running this on our system, you have to allow or whitelist this directory. Once hackers kind of figure out where those directories are, they can kind of hide their malware. So, but to your point, I think earlier, defense in depth, multiple layers, we can kind of slow them down. I really appreciate your optimism that it's not necessarily a fatalistic thing to just kind of throw our hands up and say we're all getting hacked. I do appreciate that, because the significance of that is that it then allows us to not give up. It allows us to keep trying. Before we end the show, go ahead.
Not just give up and keep trying, but also helping senior executives understand complexity and the complexity that exists in small to large organizations. And if we can systematically go through and redesign and redesign how we implement security, starting at the host level. IDSs, proxies, they're great, but really so much stuff is bypassing that because everything's SSL almost.
Yeah,
that's why we need those controls at the host level.
Before we wrap up, there's two last topics I want to pick your brain on. I want to really get into one of the passion areas that you have. I want our audience to know all the great work you're doing fighting human trafficking, some of the books you've written. I'd love for you to plug some of those books and really just give you an opportunity to kind of have a platform here, because you're on such a noble force and cause here that we want to amplify that. We want to use this podcast to kind of amplify the amazing work you're doing. But before we do, I want to take advantage of the fact that you have a degree in sociology, and I want to ask you a question about one of the things that I believe that we're experiencing with ransomware is we have societies around the world that are targeting America specifically because of the wealth. They know that America is very, there's a lot of money there, people can pay the ransom, but there's not a fear of there's not a fear of punishment. There's no deterrent effect because there's no extradition treaties. There's no fear that they're going to actually be punished for this crime. And I feel like they can almost rationalize it as America being the great devil and that's going to attack these people. So there's definitely some things that are happening that are causing, I think, this rise in ransomware attack from around the world, specifically targeting America primarily. If you look at the studies, it's like 70% of ransomware is specifically, targeting American-based interests and companies, right? But with your background and your degree and everything, would you attribute some of the rise being the fact that there's no threat of punishment with, maybe a moralistic or, these other motivations that are driving it, ideological, not just financial?
Oh, absolutely. Because, one of the biggest, I guess one of the primary reasons for compromises or attacking is opportunistic. And when you look at a country that has things like insurance, where they know that this provider is going to pay, absolutely, they're going to start targeting those organizations in that country for sure. And I would say that if other countries also start having these big insurance premiums to pay out things, they're going to be targeted just as well. So they're basically just going to follow the money, if you will. And I don't know if I should mention my novels because I want to go back to and rewrite those. I looked at them, I pulled my book down and looked at them like, oh my gosh, that's a terribly written sentence, you know.
That's
So
well.
but
I just want to really thank you for all your work there.
well,
It's
I'm kind
significant.
of more I'm kind of more
Yeah.
into augmented reality, and we have a program we're working on where we are writing an augmented reality program to help people learn. Well, there's an organization called Vermont Works for Women, and they are an organization that introduces women and non-binary people to careers that would normally be off limits to them. And one is construction. And in the summertime, they have throughout the year they have this construction program, and folks can go there, learn it, and they don't have to pay anything. They get transportation uh, reimbursements, childcare, reimbursements, things like that. And there were two tools that really intimidate people: the MIG welder and the miter saw. And so what we're working on are some augmented reality experiences to help people learn how to use those so they're not so intimidating when they actually go to the machines themselves. And that's been extended to potentially moving this into the Vermont Corrections Women's Correction Center, so that while they're incarcerated, they can be exposed to the construction trade, so that when they get out, they have some familiarity and have been exposed to it. So that, potentially it could be a tool that can be expanded on to train people in using construction tools and using augmented reality. And so we're working with that organization right now to try to use a technology for social good.
It's really amazing. There's so much good that you're doing, Duane, and you have done. I was so impressed, reading your background, that when you wrote the books, not only are you helping people, but 100% of the royalties and money you actually donate to support organizations that support victims of human trafficking. And you really speak out. You're really out there doing good for the whole community and everything. So we just want to thank you for everything you're doing there. And for people that are really interested in learning more about you and everything, we'll paste any kind of links that you'd like us to post
Okay.
here on there. Is there any last minute kind of platform that you'd like to use this for people that are listening? We'll just kind of leave that open ended for you.
I did a TEDx talk, and wanting to. My doctorate degree is in education, and I'm starting my dissertation now, and my research is in the fall. And my TEDx talk was about how we can help to change our education system to make it more of a community-based learning system. And part of that was getting our middle school and high school students to become certs for their local community. So they take what they're learning in school and apply that to the real world while they're teenagers. And I built a case for that in that TEDx talk. And it's something I really want to amplify. It's something once I'm done with my dissertation, get my degree, I'm going to focus on this quite a bit more, because there's a lot of teenagers and middle age, tweens and teens out there, and that we already trust in jobs that you're like, oh, teenagers are doing that. A 15-year-old can be a lifeguard. 15-year-old lifeguard, security practitioner. We're talking about lives for one thing, directly on a day-to-day basis. And I really want to see our education system changed. And one is standardized testing. Keep the Common Core, keep the outcomes, get rid of the standardized testing, and use tools to help track progress over a period of the year, learning, attendance, behavior. And then you can see that in real time. The community can see in real time if the school is doing anything to help kids, because you have metrics. The principals can step in. Financial resources that are being sent all over the place can be honed in on schools that actually need it. And the resources can be used, that money for standardized testing can be used to bring in resources to the school to help students who are struggling, because students bring in a lot of background and personal issues that impact their learning. So the burden of how well the school teachers and principal are doing should not be put on students' back because of a standardized test. So yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, and Larry, I want to give you a chance. Do you have any other questions for Duane before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I do have one question I was thinking about. I know that you've been you celebrating your 24th year in cybersecurity. What is your driving motivation that keeps you wanting to learn more and not just staying at one level in cybersecurity? Because I know it's a changing field, monthly or weekly or yearly. What is your driving motivation?
My driving motivation was like 2 weeks ago, I got my MITRE Attack cyber intel certification. And my driving motivation, geez, I guess I never thought about that. What I liked about the industry is that, one, I was always learning. I like that. And two, it is exciting when you have a win. It's exciting when you have, when an organization has been compromised and you go in and you can help them get to a level where you can minimize the chances of that. And I like the education part of it. When I went from Cape Fear College to the government, that's where I spent a lot of time helping other organizations within NOAA, where I worked, helping them to implement good security practices and being able to hear from them how they're able to now have insight into their network. So if anything that keeps me going is the learning that goes on and the sharing of knowledge that occurs as well. And the excitement of the field, because you don't know what's going to happen next. I worked incident response for 6 years, and I did not go into work with any expectations. Whatever showed up, whatever happened, it happened, and you have to be ready for it. So I liked the learning aspects of it and how you use so much of what you know, plus some, when it comes to incident response, for example. What keeps me going now is the teaching of new people into the industry and helping them become security professionals, not just practitioners. We want to teach students to think about security and not just be worker bees, if you will. So how does my job, what is the impact if something happens here? Not just to the organization, but to the individuals in the organization and the individuals who's impacted by the data. And in one class I teach, information assurance, that's how we look at information from a perspective of, okay, you hear about data breaches, but let's see what happens to an individual person when there's a data breach. Let's look at this lawsuit and see what was the impact to them because of a security lapse, for example. And that's what keeps me going, is to keep getting folks to think big about security and not just how to hack.
That's awesome.
Sorry, that was a long response.
No, that was really good.
It's a hard question.
No, that was a really good question. And Larry, are you asking, Larry, because you're wondering about your own motivation, or do you want to share about your motivation?
Yes and no, because you wonder, you got a lot. I'm changing fields, so I'm changing from managing warehouses and coaching football and basketball and things like that to actually getting into cybersecurity that I'm very, very passionate about. So I also wonder that someone like you and Joe that's been in the field for 20 plus years, you see a lot of people at some jobs that just get burnt out. But from what I'm learning at the beginning stages of just about IT and cybersecurity, it's a changing field yearly. And you're always updating your knowledge and you're always learning. So that's something that really intrigued me about the field. That was just the question I was wondering about.
The transition from a different field is really cool, by the way. I see a lot of folks on Twitter who are coming from, like, there's a young lady right now who she was a social worker, and she's now going into cybersecurity, which is really cool. and I like that you the experience that you have as a manager and understanding how businesses work, understanding processes, all of that's going to come into play. Being a coach of young people, you know how to communicate with people, you know how to encourage people. All of that's going to come into play with your career in cybersecurity. And I like that you didn't mention money, and I don't mention money. Yes, there's a lot of money to be made, but it's something about the work that we do and I do that keeps me going. Because if I want to make a lot of money, I wouldn't be teaching, right? If I want to make $400,000 or $500,000, I go out into the industry, be a CIO or something like that. But it's about the love of this field, and realizing what you're doing as a cybersecurity professional, who you're helping.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that motivates me, I can really empathize with both what you're saying is I feel like hackers are bullies, and I feel like they need to be stopped. There's a lot of people out there, grandparents out there that rely on their nursing home and everything, and if they get ransomed, they can't get their prescriptions. I mean, that's wrong.
Yes.
So
yes.
I feel like, there's a lot of what motivates me is really wanting to help people and protect them from these bullies out there.
So what you just said, that's textbook of looking at the big picture, looking at the individual who's impacted by that ransomware attack. Yes, absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And something's got to be done. Someone's got to stand up, and we can, if we all do our own individual part, hopefully it'll add up to a larger, sum, right? But really want to thank you for your time today, and it was really a fantastic conversation. Would love to have you back on the show, sometime as well. And so, what's next for you? So, 24 years. This is actually a pretty big milestone for you. Again, congratulations on 24 years in cybersecurity. Thanks. Any future plans? And what's next?
I would really like to work for a think tank or consult with a think tank. I still want to stay in academia because, now I'm getting my degree in education. I've changed a lot about how I teach as a result of my doctorate degree and learning about cognition and learning. So I really want to do something more with that. And a lot of these training providers out there, I'd love to work with them to help them present material so it's easier to learn. And not easier to learn, but not just easier to learn, but you can transfer that knowledge from that textbook to basically any environment you go into. So it sounds really strange, but I really want to get more into education of cybersecurity and work with these training providers to really help them, spruce up how they're presenting information to novices and to advanced people. I just gave a talk yesterday at Dyna Initiative about how to train and mentor experts. It's very different from how you train and mentor a novice.
And so we were just talking, Larry, about Twitter, the sort of there's great parts of Twitter, and then you have, because of the anonymous nature of social media, a lot of people hide behind things and they attack women on Twitter. And there was this thing that was going on, Larry, the last couple of weeks where there was a female that kind of, I guess she posted a picture of herself in a bikini. Yeah. And there was a guy that was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't come to Twitter for your bikini pic. I just want your knowledge, not like that." And it made her feel bad, it hurt her feelings. And so what was amazing is the entire Twitter InfoSec community really rallied around her. And there was guys posting pictures of themselves in bikinis, and there was all sorts of things. I mean, really, everyone kind of came to her defense, and I was really proud of that community, and it was pretty cool. But
I don't have a bikini, but I posted a photo that I had this shirt on, looked like a print shirt. And I had my
I didn't see that. I'm gonna have to go back and check that out. It's pretty funny.